Hello, thank you for inviting me to your to this wonderful garden and to have a look at your shipping container that you have in your garden.
You're very welcome.
First of all, can you just tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Bryony. I'm the co-founder of Broaden, we're a filmmaking company. But more broadly, we create films and experiences, and we're really passionate about empowering audiences, starting conversations, and generally just shifting perceptions.
Well, let's talk about this first of all. It's really great that you're doing that, but you've got a shipping container in your back garden. I don't know if you noticed, but if you look behind you, you have a shipping container.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pure capitalism, isn't it? They're out there in a box.
Absolutely. And again, for me on a personal level, realising that life is about compromise has been and continues to be a really difficult lesson, I guess. And the example of the shipping container, I studied architecture. You go to university with all these fresh ideas, you're going to change the world. But actually, again, you've got to change the system from inside, and you've got to work with the resources you have access to. I didn't really love shipping container conversions as a student. I felt like they were quite cliche. And yet when it's come to what can a small video production business do with the budget that we've got, this landed on our laps. And actually, being forced to innovate through parameters is one of the best things that humans do. So yes, shipping containers, they're a sign of globalization and commodification of things. And yet also, this has spent 10 to 15 years on the sea, traveling between China, the UK, other countries. It's standardized, so a lot of the components that we'll use to make this office conversion will be minimizing waste where possible. We've gone with a low impact kind of foundation system. So for us, DIY ethos is at the heart of what makes our business thrive. And I think getting our hands dirty and not trying to be this really glossy production company, but actually doing something at cinematic level, but doing DIY projects like building your own office conversion on the side, that's kind of our DNA. And it's really hard to after, well, it took us a while to realize that the DIY maker ethos is part of our brand, because it's so easy these days. I'm sure you find it. You go on LinkedIn or Instagram and every brand is slick, everyone's got it all down to a T, and you've got to spend a bit of time with yourself, as I'm sure you have, to work out like what is it about me that's different. And for me and George and Broaden more generally, DIY and getting our hands dirty is just...
So specialist generalist then.
Yeah, well, it's just undeniably fulfilling being able to cut a piece of timber and work something out, I think. I mean, George has spent hours on YouTube looking at wiring diagrams for DIY solar systems. We actually used to live in a camper van, and there was a load of things that went wrong, but there was so many things that went right. And I think we felt so empowered by being in control of our household ingoings and outgoings, you know, knowing that the sun is powering the battery that you're then using to edit videos. The impact that you have, you feel proud of it rather than feeling like you're a burden on the planet. And I think I'm a huge advocate. If anyone's wondering if they should have a go at making something themselves, I'm always in the camp of do it. You know, maybe I regret saying that when George and I are scratching our head over a new invention, but yeah, big fan of DIY.
So there must have been quite a journey then, or was it just suddenly you were going the traditional path and then you just turned right and became this rebel with a cause?
Yeah.
What was well, first of all, how did you and George are a couple, how did you two meet?
Yeah, well, George and I met up a mountain in Spain. So I guess we started unconventionally. Me personally, I guess I can thank my parents, I suppose, just for always instilling curiosity and really not trying to present themselves as perfect, but instead being really open-minded people. So I don't feel like it was a sort of conventional then turn right. I think I'm really like blessed with the foundations I had, I guess. But I did do my time in the kind of commercial world, the design agency world, but it's always been on the more boutique side. And very early on, I realized that I was quite passionate about strategy and leadership. And so all of the things along my path that have felt totally undesigned and happenstance, because almost all of the things in my life have been happenstance. Now that we're at a point where we're running a production company, we're growing, we're excited about having team members and collaborators and employees. And George and I are really enjoying leadership and strategy, as hard as it is. It's all clicking that, you know, 10 years ago I was working as an urban designer on big kind of urban development projects in Australia. And I'm thinking, when I was really interested in stakeholders and shareholders and what does that all mean and big picture thinking and stuff, now I see why those things were interesting to me, because we're getting a chance to do it. And possibly also we're realizing how hard it is, you know, you do a lot of work in the leadership space, and it's never something that you've gotten good enough at and then you stop. I think it's a constant process of being self-aware first and being a good listener, and those feedback loops of communication. I guess I recognize that you can spend your whole life learning to be a good leader and a good collaborator.
It's interesting because I talk about leadership. It's just a journey, and leadership itself is not a person or a position. It's a field of energy within a group of people.
Yeah.
And whatever, you know, whoever's going to lead from one point to the next will just be, it might be the most enthusiastic, or the one with experience, expertise, or just the event, the way the event arises. You know, it kind of emerges. Leadership emerges from a group, sort of thing.
I love that way of putting it, and I really think we've got a lot of the narrative around leaders wrong. I think firstly we assume that they're good orators, they're good speakers, and they're commanding. I think a good leader is an enabler, and they recognise people's strengths and desires, and they create an environment in which everyone can thrive. I read a really interesting study about group settings and how the more evenly spread the amount of airtime everyone in the groups gets, the more likely the group are to make good strategic decisions. And I think when you're running a business, you have to be aware of those dynamics of being introverted or extroverted, or divergent or convergent, and not pigeonholing people either.
Sometimes an introvert and sometimes an extrovert. It just depends on the setting that I'm in at the present time, sort of thing. But so on the journey that you've been taking, there must have been challenges along the way. I mean, getting this thing in the back garden for one must have been quite a... So what sort of skills, what kind of character traits do you think help getting over challenges like putting a container in your back garden?
It's that overused word, resilience, I think. And I think the Tories would love us to assume resilience means just sticking it out individually. But I think proper resilience comes from collectivism. It comes from having a good support network and knowing when you need to lean on those people. I think probably the biggest hurdles that Broaden have had are the times when we've forgotten that support network exists. And the hardest times, but when we've managed to power through, has been because we've actually found access to fantastic mentors or government training schemes or investment opportunities, or even just relatives or people commenting on videos and saying, this video changed my life. I mean, that's fuel to keep going doing what you're doing. It really, Broaden was kicked off by, well, all thanks to George, really. Like, I'm a sort of outsider, I'm a producer that recognised his talent, but George is a self-taught filmmaker, and at the point in which we were living in Australia, a few years into our relationship, he started documenting this story of 3 trail runners, totally normal guys, taking on an 100-mile race around Mont Blanc. I guess really inspired by their personal story, but this broader narrative around everyday people doing extraordinary things. And by the end of making that film, I was sort of working with George, and I felt really passionate that the film deserved a kind of promotion and an impact campaign. So that's where we discovered that we have really compatible skills, because George had just finished making this really gorgeous piece of work and was exhausted and not in the mood for necessarily self-promoting. And I was able to swoop in and go, this is fantastic, let's really promote it. So we did an online launch and we screened it, and we had 1,000 people tune in to watch it. And totally self-made release. We've since amassed over 300,000 views. And the kind of underlying consistent comment that people say about it is, this video really made me realise normal people can do amazing things. And I love that you didn't just profile 3 elites. You know, they are extraordinary humans, they can run 100 miles, but they're still normal guys with kids or lives or all of those things. And I think, yeah, I don't think there's a solution to your question was about hardship. How do you get past that? You have to have a deep well of those positive comments, you know, that you can go back to and draw upon. And I don't think we've kind of got it sorted or we've got it mastered yet. But I try to adopt that approach of going back to the good that you've done for other people. Not to say there haven't been some there's been some hairy moments along the way, that's for sure.
Right, yeah. So if you're, you know, if you were to summarise and kind of say, okay, here are three steps to success, no matter what your project is. I mean, you've mentioned the fact that the film about the guys running around Mont Blanc, they're just ordinary people achieving attempting extraordinary things. So it's ordinary is okay, most of us are. We need most of us to get doing something. So how do you do, you know, I talk about, you know, we're trying to get to this new world perhaps, we're discovering our way there, we need to collaborate our way there, which is kind of anti-capitalist for a start, isn't it? And so what else do you think you need? What are those other strengths? We're chatting about resilience. What else do you think that people should consider when trying to take something? How do they not starve, for instance, trying to, you know, be purpose driven? Because you talk about purpose-led business, don't you?
We talk about purpose a lot. I think there's a few strands. I think one, I would say, and maybe this is obvious as a video person, but storytelling. Stories are really powerful. We don't just need facts and figures. So we need really compelling cinematic work that makes people realise, A, there's a climate crisis, B, there's solutions, and C, those solutions, as you know, in some ways as difficult as they're going to be, actually the things that they're going to bring beyond are a much more beautiful way of living. It's going to be more low tech, it's going to be slower, it's going to be more innovative because we're going to be working with less. We have to do more with less. So I think storytelling. And my other one would be balance, I think. Going in all out is a really great approach if you want to burn out. And I think that applies to an hour, not just a year. Everyone can do something. And that's not buy a bamboo toothbrush, but it's about living in a different way, setting your intentions, quitting a job if it's not ethical. That to me it's not a big thing, that's a small thing. We should be doing that. We should be starting small businesses, we should be shopping locally. And again, it can be £5 a day and all the way up. And taking that balanced lifestyle and applying it on a collective so that we don't burn out, I think is also really important. So like finding networks that are already championing these things. So we're here in Greater Manchester. There's already amazing programs out there for active transport, for business support schemes, all of these different things, and tapping into those networks, for me at least, has been helpful in terms of finding balance, because I've instantly gone, it's not all on me. I know that my effort as a small business owner, or my effort as a consumer or a producer, is part of this broader thing. So I don't know, that answer is somewhere, it's kind of on the way to what the fossil fuel companies want, I guess, which is make it all about the individual. I think it's, as an individual, make change, and don't just say wait till tomorrow, but also realise that as an individual, if you're part of a broader network and you're all making change, even if it's small and even if it's not everything, it's still progress. And that to me is where it fits with storytelling, because that's the cycle. You know, I wouldn't have become vegetarian unless I knew stories about people becoming vegetarian. We need stories to demonstrate the change is possible, and anecdotes and storytelling and profiling diverse people that we can recognise. Those things go hand in hand, and then it starts to get easier. It's definitely, the path to change is not one that we were designed to make alone. I think we're the only species that thinks we can fix things on our own. And it would be really lonely, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, they say, don't they, if you put one monkey on an island and one person on an island, the monkey would outlive,
Really?
yeah, outcompete the human. But if you put 10 humans and 10 monkeys, the 10 humans would collaborate the monkeys and survive better. So yeah, we collaborated our way to the top of the tree. I like that point about you know, tapping into people that are already doing something. So you might not have an idea of what you want to do, but if you go and talk to other people and say, you know, if someone came to you and said, well, okay, what are you missing on your mission? And then there might be something there that you could start that would support you.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings us to a good point, which is that as Broaden, the big change for us was seeing ourselves as storytellers and not just makers of video. And not just we sell a process, but we actually want to be writing the story. We want to be sitting in that pre-production stage. And right now we're looking for partners, whether that's financial partners, storytelling partners, who want to start breaking the mold a bit of video and working out, is there a format that's cinematic, doesn't have to be hyper-conceptual film festival world, but also doesn't have to be hyper-commercial, where we can make short and medium form documentary stories co-funded with a common purpose. And yeah, so you know, anyone that sort of thinks that vision sounds good, we're sort of learning. The first step is, if we tell people that's our mission and our manifesto, eventually people will go, oh yeah, do you remember Broaden? And that for us is the office. Building this shipping container is a physical manifestation of our mission. And you know, it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind of making enough money, basically, that you can really lose sight of that vision and mission. But I realise now, you know, after 3.5, 4 years in business, those two things have to be in parallel. And I think that is true of a personal manifesto. That would be my kind of big takeaway, is having a personal manifesto, knowing what you stand for. It's just your kind of guiding compass, isn't it? And telling other people that they will be attracted to that, because that's, you know, it's linked to something they've heard. That's how we met, was, you know, seeing things that people say or write about their purpose and their manifesto. You realise, oh, you know, we're on the same page here. We want the same end goal. We might be treading different paths, but we're all here for the same end goal.
Yeah. It's it reminds me of a point that someone else I interviewed, a friend of mine, Dr. Kathy Allen over in America. She talks about regenerative leadership. I'm being attacked by a plant behind me. And one of the things that she's mentioned is the fact, because media is so powerful and owned by a few interested parties that want to keep the paradigm the way it is, that you don't hear the massive uprising that's just below the level of consciousness, because it's not allowed to intrude.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings your stuff into, makes your work even more powerful, because but one of the things, there's lots and lots of people doing their own individual thing. Absolutely. But they need to become the network, and of course storytelling would help do that, and also getting, being able to try and raise the profile of the whole movement, sort of broader movement, and it's interesting as well. Leaders, I read somewhere, leaders tell 4 times as many stories. Good leaders tell 4 times as many stories. So yeah, that ties in. Anyway. Yeah. So what's next? What's the next challenge? Obviously, painting and decorating. You've started that on the other side.
Yeah. I think more of the same for Broaden, and that not in a boring way, but we've really only just feel like we've hit our stride and we've got a path, and just growing that network, growing the kind of the impact of the work that we do, being really intentional. It's, it's not just about point and shoot. It's about, think about what you want to film. In a world filled with media, we want to make really intentional work. And being balanced as people outside of our jobs as well, enjoying nature, enjoying summer, and enjoying the things that we stand for: food, culture, people, And yeah, finally on the topic of music and culture and music specifically, one of the kind of side projects we've started is Broaden co-produces a festival here in Carrington called Night Garden. I sort of dreamt it up 3 years ago, and yeah, it's happening this August. It's a one-day celebration of audio-visual delights, and hopefully a kind of expression of the more kind of mad, kooky, groovy, funky side of things, and a chance for George and I to let our hair down and express ourselves in that way, not take ourselves too seriously. So yeah, I think we feel really optimistic and really delighted to meet people like you who believe in a better future.
Good time to do it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
That was
you.
great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Emma.